Hello and welcome to Rogersmath. My name is Jesse, and I am here today with Aaron, and I'm very excited to be talking with him. He was a speaker who had some things that I thought were important for the world to say, and what I wanted to do with this podcast is elevate those voices that I think are saying some important things. And so, Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'd like you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what they're going to come away from this podcast with. What would you like them to have as their takeaway?
All right, so for those who are interested, for those who stick around for this podcast, you're looking forward to learning things such as the fundamentals of AI, various use cases of AI, kind of where the whole AI thing really started. Because believe it or not, there's actually quite a bit of history as to the pioneering of AI. And then also, some of the directions and some of the future possibilities we can see with AI.
That's perfect. That sounds great. And so, what's the perspective that you're coming from with this? Where's your starting point?
So I'm a student. I'm a cybersecurity student. I go to college, and my exposure to AI specifically actually started off with, just mostly hearsay. We seen it on the news. You saw the headlines. AI is the next big thing. It was kind of weird because during the pandemic, I'm pretty sure you remember, Jesse, Bitcoin and cyber currency was like the thing. It was a thing that was getting all the headlines and maybe besides, certain other things. But um suddenly we saw like a quick shift inside of like the news media. They quickly went from cryptocurrency to just AI, 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 AI. And naturally, as most people, this caught my attention. So I looked into it. You know, um, some of the most accessible versions of AI, as I'll probably put it for now, is was something called stable diffusion. Now, I don't want to get too deep into that. I feel that would be better to talk about later. But basically, that was my first exposure. It was an image generation AI. And yeah, I've had some pretty good fun with that. I would like to talk about it if you'd like.
Yeah, of course. So you were you getting into it before everybody was changing their Facebook profiles to like the cartoon AI version, or is that sort of what caught your attention?
I would say I'm probably right around the cusp of like just like the beginning of that exposure because YouTube is where AI started to blow up a lot because you have to understand AI is a very technically it's a very powerful thing, and because of that you need state-of-the-art hardware, and a lot of people don't have access to that. We saw during COVID a lot of people had to go online because the going online was the way of the world. That was the way everyone could get things done. So a lot of people invested in technology. And because of this investment in technology, a part of me feels like this is where AI really, really started to accelerate because more people had time behind computers. And you give enough time to people, you know, using whatever technology, eventually things are going to develop and accelerate. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
I think it really did accelerate for a lot of educators who had been hearing that remote
Yes, yes.
education was going to pick up and that we should really be thinking about it. And then suddenly we weren't just thinking about it, but all of us were instantaneously having to adapt to it
Yes, Chat
overnight.
GPT. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, there was ChatGPT, and then even before that, I remember a lot of instructors were actually preferring to retire rather than teaching their courses by Zoom. So even just the
Mhm.
remote, the switch to the internet, kind of started with that. But you're right, it really picked up.
Yes, yes,
The
definitely.
that's where I think probably um, the biggest thing that we've been hearing from educators and from people in an academic context for this artificial intelligence has been about plagiarism and about the ability of AI to correctly or incorrectly cite sources, how accurate
Yes.
it is. So, all of these things are kind of where people's minds are at, but that's not really where I think we're going to ultimately go with this conversation. I think there's a lot more to unpack, but I think we should probably start there because that's where our audience probably is thinking, should I even learn ChatGPT because my teacher tells me it's a tool for cheating, and
Yeah.
they don't want me to go anywhere near it. I talk to a lot of students, and that's what their exposure has been. So maybe you could talk about that.
So yes. AI in the educational sector, there's a lot of efficacy that's being debated. There's a lot, as you mentioned, you know, Chat GPT being called a cheating tool. It's already, you know, a lot of people have their opinions. There's a lot of controversy with Chat
Yeah,
GPT. And the thing is, you know, at least how I see it, Chat GPT is just a tool, and at the end of the day, AI is a new technology. It's a brand new technology. I would say we're almost on the bleeding edge because, you have to understand technology and how technology develops and integrates. The most important thing is integrating. We have to look into the history of how technology has integrated into our economy, into our society, and, how it's panned out over time. And the thing is, the reason why a lot of people feel sketchy about chat gpt ai in general is because right now one person mentioned chat gpt, and not just chat gpt but really just ai. It's kind of like the wild west right now. You know what I mean when I say the wild west? There's not really much regulation. I know I mentioned this during the meeting that we had. you know Without that regulation, it's going to give off that appearance that you can do anything with it. And to an extent, that's sort of true. I wouldn't say we can do everything with it, but there's a lot that you can do. And without that regulation, we're not going to really have those ethical boundaries of, okay, this is how you would use AI. This is not how you use AI. There's not really many laws in place with AI either. And because of that, we actually see, to expand on your inquiry, not just in the educational sector, but even in various industries. Like, for example, um, the movie industry. You know, why pay an actor? Check this out. Why pay an actor when I could just get your face, right? You
yeah,
follow me?
oh
I can
yeah,
get your
yeah.
face and I can just put you on someone's body that kind of looks relatively like you. And you don't even need to come to the studio no more. You don't need to fly out. You don't need to get up out of bed.
Hmm.
And you can just get paid like that. A lot of people are actually worried about that because that sounds like a good thing, but you have to remember, at the end of the day, whatever saves money is going to save money. And all it takes is for someone to say, you know what, how about I just don't use your face? How about I
Yeah.
just develop my own character with AI, and then I don't even have to touch your face, and then I don't have to pay you. Now we have concerns. So now, steering the wheel back to the educational sector, AI can be used for cheating. AI can be used for malicious purposes. You could make it, let's say you don't like a professor. You could use AI to defame that professor, make that professor appear to be someone that that professor isn't. You know, like you said, I could use AI to cheat on my homework. I could use AI to cheat, write a paper. And these are things that are concerning with AI. But moving forward, I really do think there just needs to be more regulation. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. I think regulation is inevitable because whenever there's a new technology, people do abuse it.
Mhm.
And unless there's a rule I mean, so when it comes to like, let's say, um, Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX collapse, and
Yeah.
there was fraud taking place. There was misleading statements made to investors and things like that, and we can
Hmm.
still try those things under the existing laws. But at the same time, it also gets facilitated in a lot of different ways by the anonymity of the people involved and by um, the ambiguous nature of what the laws are, and especially the international nature of the uh, uh, um, you know crypto
Yeah.
infrastructure, I guess you could
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of question marks around that. There's a lot of regulation that still needs to happen with that. And I think we're only seeing the very, very beginnings of that with AI as well. And I'm sure there's going to
Hmm.
be so many cases of AI fraud. I actually know people that have been contacted by someone who they thought was a loved one that needed $10,000 urgently,
That happened to me.
and yeah, there you go, there you go,
Yeah, that happened to
and
me. Yep.
um, and it's a very convincing artificial intelligence generated voice, just doing exactly what you were saying, where it was sort of puppeteering the actor, right? But in this case, it was the loved one that was being um, mimicked by a bad actor. And so, again, the problem seems to be that the technological systems, we can strengthen those and fortify those as much as we want, but that human factor is still very much a vulnerability. And I'm sure in cybersecurity, they drive this point home that the attack vectors against human targets are where the vast majority of the
Concerns. Yeah.
vulnerability is. Yeah, and the concern.
Yeah.
It's by phishing
Hmm.
attacks, it's by social engineering, it's by all of these. We humans are the weak link, right? In
Yeah.
the, in the
Yeah.
security framework, we are the weak link,
Can't you
and
believe that?
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's very hard to, like, for example, hack an encrypted messaging system in a what do they call that kind of attack? I forget the name of it. Man in the middle attack, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Man in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's pretty hard to pull off. Not impossible, especially with increasing technology, but
Yeah.
it's hard to pull off. But the once it gets to either end, the humans at either end are we can be fooled. We have emotions, we have biases, we have all kinds of problems, and I think that fear that AI is going to be used to exploit these, I think that's already come to fruition, as your experience and those of many others underscores. And I think there's a piece of humility that anyone who's saying to themselves, "Oh, I would never fall for that," needs to take on board, which is that these AI systems, just like how they're trained to be very good at recommending Netflix suggestions,
Yeah.
and friends of, oh yeah, I remember that. I'd like to friend that person. Just like it's good at making those kind of recommendations, it knows us intimately enough to be able to push our buttons and know what we will respond emotionally to rather than logically to.
And
And
this is just the
yeah,
beginning of the ride. Just to
yeah,
interject real quick there, all this you're mentioning, this is just the beginning of the ride.
yeah.
Imagine what will we have, 10, 20, 30 years from now. I'm in my 20s. So, 30 years from now, I'm likely going to be approaching like 40-ish, 50-ish something.
Hmm.
And, it just goes to show, imagine how the world's going to be then. We're
Yeah.
talking about this now. We're talking about all this fear, but imagine, the world I predict the world's going to go through a change because you see, one thing I've always studied, because I've looked at new technology. I'm actually very lucky to be born at this time in
Hmm.
society because I'm
Yeah.
witnessing a lot of technology, come out, electric cars, Internet of Things, just so many different evolutions happening right before my eyes.
Hmm.
So I get to see how people react to this. And in the past, we've seen people kind of react like, oh, new technology bad, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. You know what I'm saying? And typically you'll see this a lot in the older generations because they didn't have the technology we had growing up. And, I don't want to throw a bunch of people into a box and say they all think like that. Obviously, everyone has their own opinions. But generally speaking, you know, the younger generation is always going to be more accepting into technology, the technology they have access to, because, they don't really know anything better. They don't know a world without that technology. And I don't think AI is going to go anywhere. AI is not going to go anywhere. AI is going to stick around for a long time. And because of this, there's going to have to be a point, there's going to be a clash. AI is going like this and people are going like this. There's going to be a
Right.
clash
Yeah.
at some point, and
Yeah.
people are either going to have to go like this or they're going to have to curve AI like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the thing is, s- the realistic thing that we are probably going to see is AI is probably going to curve as more regulations happen instead of just shooting straight up. They're probably going to curve it more like this, and then people in society are going to eventually reach a point where they're accepting, and then things are going to be parallel, and that's how things are going to go up from there. But we mentioned a lot of negatives with AI so far in this podcast. I want to definitely just go over some of the positives if that's fine with you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I think they're so intertwined, right?
yeah,
Because if it were all bad, then we would just say, "Oh, outlaw this thing." But there's so
yeah,
much
yeah,
good that like this, we're talking about life-changing technologies, and it's not just life changing in terms of like medicine, which of course AlphaFold and some of those other technologies. If you want to Google AlphaFold, that's a really cool
yeah. I'm looking
project
at
that
it now.
Google has done. Yeah, and that's something that I don't know as much about as I would want to, but like
That's
for
awesome,
anybody
by
who
the way. I'm reading. I read a little script on it. It's pretty nice.
yeah, for anybody who doubts that there's like real world value. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it that I use ChatGPT every day, and I'm sure Aaron is probably using AI every day at this point too.
I don't
Uh,
use Chat GPT, but I have my own little thing I use.
and that's yeah, that's what do you think of Llama 3? Have you tried it sounds like you
Yes,
like open source stuff.
yes. Actually, so this is actually pretty cool. If you are watching this podcast now, a little project you can try is if you want to use a Llama 3 based model AI right now, if you have access to Instagram or WhatsApp, you should have a feature to be able to use AI. Not for everyone. I don't know how Facebook delegates that. Um, but Meta did come out with an AI that people can use on this platform. And just like ChatGPT, you could ask it questions. You could even generate images. And I use it pretty regularly because it's fairly easy, it's accessible. You don't have to pay for it. And your account's already made because if you use
Hmm.
Instagram or WhatsApp, it's there. And to answer your question, it's pretty intuitive. It's pretty intuitive. It's actually pretty smart, and it helps me in a lot of cases. If you would like to talk about that, I'm not sure. If you want to
Yeah,
go ahead.
I've been using it just on the platforms that you're talking about, like
Hmm.
Messenger, and I have WhatsApp. I haven't used it on that yet, but I've been using it in Messenger,
They
and
released it quietly on WhatsApp,
yeah.
so a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's probably on a lot of their products. I know that's kind of what Meta is thinking is that
they're
we
pushing
have
it. They're
our own
definitely
products.
pushing it. Yeah,
Yeah, we're not really an AI company. We have our own product line, but we're going to use AI to make our products better. That's their attitude, and I think
Google
it's
as
working.
well.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think it's working, and Google as well. Yeah, Google has their own stuff,
Microsoft
and
too.
yeah, and all of them are getting better. All of them are getting the quality of experience as a user from my perspective. I really like these things. I agree with you that the meta version of Llama 3 is it's very intelligent. I've been writing a short story with it. I had it write me some code. It's good. It's good stuff. It's right up there with. I'm not going to say it's better than GPT-4, but I like it kind of comparable maybe. Um,
Yeah,
Claude as well. I like Claude.
yeah,
If you go to Claude.ai, that's a fun one. Also free, but I don't mind paying for the Chat GPT version because I'll give you an example. I was in my yard and I saw a snake and kind of freaked me out a little bit. I
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
anything about snakes, so
South
I took
Florida
a pic.
man.
Right? Yeah. So I
Yeah,
took a
yeah.
picture of it and I popped it into GPT-4 and I was like, what is this thing? And it's giving me the genus and the species and you know the big question is this
Isn't
thing
that
venomous?
amazing? Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing?
it's
Yeah.
it's just absolutely fascinating and for it to be able to do that image identification so effectively. And I went and looked up what it said. I Googled it because you can't just trust it. So
Yeah,
I went
yeah,
in
yeah.
and I Googled it and sure enough, it was exactly. I'm looking at the pictures of the thing. And I'm like, yes, it identified this correctly. That is what that is, and
Mm-hmm.
it's non venomous. So that put me at ease. I just let it
Yeah.
go about its way, and but it is one of those things where you don't know how much it can do until you find yourself in a position where you see an opportunity to use it, and
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of features of GPT-4. Since that's not your preferred model, we won't spend a lot of time on that. But
Yeah.
I use it a lot for coding, and so that's been helping me in my learning journey because I use it as a tutor, and I think we could get into more about that, about how some of the positive uses that you mentioned. Like I think tutoring is one of those things that could really revolutionize the way that we educate ourselves and individualize
Mhm.
education. And now that everybody, unknowingly to them, has in their pocket a on-demand tutor that knows every subject, like you
Yeah.
got to start using this thing if you really want to learn faster, and you have to
I
learn faster.
I will say this, in the, like you said, tutoring is just one of the many things AI can help you with. I like to say, AI can really help a person. It could really inspire a person. Like, for example, I've actually used AI to help me write papers. This is something you hear a lot, I even heard that they have something called like a paper GPT or some type of, like, a lot of the companies now they're using GPT in the name, and just throwing whatever, insert whatever GPT. And they had like an essay GPT kind of thing where it'll literally write a paper for you. You can copy and paste your rubric. It'll go through your rubric and it'll analyze it, and it will produce a paper that fits that rubric. Now, whether you make it past Turnitin and you get the similarity score, the AI detection score, which more on that later.
Yeah.
Yes, I know you want to hear about that. Um, you know, it can be wonky. It can. And I know you mentioned that sometimes AI can be wrong, and AI can be wrong sometimes, but in a way, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because you see, I can't use AI to cheat on my paper. I have to still think. Now, sure, the AI can help, it can write and produce a paper for me based off of what I ask it, but I still have to read that paper. I'm probably still gonna have to change a few things up because, like you said, that similarity score can get you. Now, in my use case personally, I don't use AI with the goal of trying to get my assignment done. I use AI as a goal to help inspire me, to help me write my papers and get my work done. For example, you mentioned programming, use GPT-4 for programming. I actually use a Llama 3 model to help me program as well, and it's pretty good at it. I'm not gonna lie to you, programming is not my cup of tea. I would classify myself as more of like a security analyst kind of position. That's at least what I'm aiming for in my career. And there is some programming involved in that depending on what you do, but generally speaking, it's not programming intensive. You follow me?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, when I'm in programming, I'm not gonna necessarily understand certain concepts, or I might have to, after class, I might have to ask the professor, or what I could do is I could just use AI, and I could just ask AI, hey, explain to me what a module is. How does a module work within programming? And as you know, modules, they break up your programming, so you don't have everything in one big, what do they call it? Like a generalized module. So, if something breaks, you don't have to go through all that code. You just have
Yes.
you have that section. So, AI really helped actually explain that to me. And it took my examples and it made examples for me. But I still have to pick apart that code and make sure everything's correct. Because funny enough, you could use AI to correct itself. AI will
Hmm.
make mistakes, and then you can ask it to correct its own mistakes, and it will actually correct its own mistakes. It's pretty interesting. And this is where that line, that fear that a lot of people have, you mentioned fear earlier, that fear, once people have that understanding of what AI can actually do, that fear begins to like delegate itself and, flatten itself out, because if we can't fully rely on AI for everything and you still have to think, then that's going to separate the people who only rely on the AI right now, such as maybe someone who's cheating or trying to, you know, bogus their way through class. It's going to separate them out from the people who actually try to use it. So this leads me into my next point, at least for academia. Going forward, I really do think, besides regulation, academia should actually be accepting AI. You know, AI is the long lost child that left home at a young age and never came back, and AI just showed up at our front door. I don't think we should close the door shut. We should welcome AI in, and while we're welcoming AI in, while it's early, we could get in from early and turn the wheel in the necessary directions. Because AI can really help, just like you said, AI can tutor, AI can teach, AI can help automate things. Automation's another big thing with AI. And, you know, one thing I asked a security professional of a very big organization once. I asked him, do you ever see AI being anywhere in your network like security stack? Do you see yourself implementing AI? And there is a concern because if we implement AI and like we said, AI can make mistakes, because remember, we're human beings and we're not perfect and we're the ones who designed this AI. So the AI is not going to be perfect. We can't have something that's automated and imperfect, running our systems. So what we could do is, for example, we could use AI to help automate certain processes. And then every now and then, we can check in and see, hey, this is where, we need to make sure we keep an eye on things, or we can go ahead and just verify certain things. But these are just the many things that AI can be proposed for, in our future. You follow me?
Well, I think
Yeah.
there's human in the loop, and there's
Yeah.
human maybe on the loop, and there's human out of the loop entirely. And I think
Hmm.
the people that are trying to do the human out of the loop and are basically just putting in the prompt and copy pasting, turning that into their professor,
See,
those
that's
people
where
are
the
failing.
line, yeah, that's
Yeah,
the line, that's the
yeah.
line difference. And, you know, I want to just make sure people understand this, like any new technology, there needs to be a clear understanding of what this technology can do, where the lines are drawn, and how you should use it. Because you can't really blame people for cheating with AI, at least in my opinion. What we should do is we need to have people going out there and being like, okay, this is what you can use this tool for. This is what you can't use this tool for. I can't guarantee these certain things to you, but a lot of people don't know that. You ask most people who aren't knowledgeable about AI, hey, what do you think about AI? Oh, I ask AI, I could do it, and it does everything for me. But they don't know those limits.
Hmm.
And because they don't know those limits, there's a bit of a danger there too. People don't understand that these AIs can actually ruin people's lives. I actually heard of a case of once, this is happening, keep in mind, elementary school, middle school, high school. Somebody took a picture of their classmate and they were able to use AI to actually generate an unclothed version of them, which, when you think about these kind of things, it's very saddening, you know, imagine being that age and seeing, something like that happen to you on the internet. And, it's insane. It's insane. And, this is where the efficacy of AI really becomes into question here, how can we stop people from just doing these type of things? And my advice is we got to get the education out there. We got to let people know. We got to let people know, and there needs to be a regulation that can stop people from just needlessly doing these type of things. Now, at the end of the day, I don't think that there's ever going to be enough regulation because, people are always going to find their way around. But we could put things in place that can prevent the average Joe from going in and, doing something malicious.
Yeah, so that is a really serious challenge right now, because I
Hmm.
think it's something like in the high 90 percentage of deep fakes are being used
Deep
for
fakes, yes, that's the
the,
term.
yeah, I think that technology is primarily being used to in the adult industry, like the adult entertainment industry. And I've heard of teachers losing their jobs for starring in videos that they did not star in, right? That
Yeah.
it was somebody that maliciously took their image and did that to them, like what you were talking about.
Hmm.
and the parents and the administration didn't want to hear about it. They ignored her uh, protests of innocence
That's
and
that
just
lack of understanding, because
yeah,
you see, they don't, the administration doesn't know. They
yeah,
don't know that the AI is, is had a play in there. They see that and then they immediately hit the ban hammer.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's where this education needs to come in. There needs to be educative processes that, that go in place and educate these people. You know, Palm Beach State mentioned that, soon they're gonna have an AI related field. And when they mentioned that, it really made me excited. In a way, I was almost jealous because I'm like, kind of wish I went for that, but it's just like hearing that Palm Beach State is going ahead of the game. They're not waiting for society. They're leading society in the right direction. And we're developing these avenues from ahead of time to say, hey, we want people to know about this technology. This is a technology that needs to be put out there. You know, I want to bring up Elon Musk's Teslas. The Teslas, they have the self-driving feature, and a lot of people were like, wow, when they heard about it. I could go out for a night drinking and I could just tell my car to drive me home. That sounds pretty nice. But once you hear that it's not as developed as what they marketed out to be, which, you've actually had news sources actually take Teslas out there and drive in the city. Once the Tesla almost ran into a mail truck and killed a person. Teslas can run into people. Teslas aren't always perfect. And, you know, because the marketing doesn't necessarily highlight these things, a little asterisk at the bottom of the page is not enough, in my opinion, to tell people like, hey, don't fully rely on this. It's a system that's put in place to help you, to assist you, but you still have to be your own person, you know?
That's quite right. Yeah, and there is a I think there's a range of applications for it, and in some instances, we're going to have you can fully automate it and just see what it gets you because there's no lives on the line. Driving is not one of those things where you can
Hmm.
just see how it goes and let it experiment and no, it has to be near perfect when we release it, and and then there's all these question marks of when things do go wrong. Where are those liabilities? Uh, who's responsible? And I think there is a question of what do we do once the AI is better than the average driver? So in other words, the average human driver might have a 0.0000 whatever percent chance
Yeah.
of causing a collision or even a fatality. And then once the percentage chance of an AI driver is lower, are we making a mistake by not transferring over? Are we making an ethical or moral mistake by having more fatalities and more accidents by letting humans continue to drive? That's a question I think we're going to have to
Yeah.
answer sooner than we think.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
It's not there yet, but it's on the horizon. And we're going to need not just technologists, but also ethicists and philosophers to think these questions through and tell the engineers what the answer is because they're flying blind right now a lot of the time, right? They need
Yeah, yeah. Even in academia, like, eventually we're going to reach a point where we're going to have to answer the question, what happens when AI can be the new student?
hmm
I no longer have to show up to class. I can make an AI called Aaron and I could just send him to class.
hmm
I mean, sure, it probably would have to be an online class, but a fully online class, how would a professor know that
right.
I'm actually Aaron? How do we know? And in some cases, we're even asking that question right now. That's why we're having this discussion right now, because people are starting to think about this. And there's a bit of uncertainty there, which I see where the fear comes from. A lot of people's jobs are being threatened
Mm.
because if an AI has the power to be a student, then likely an AI has the power to do some things in the workplace too that we see average workers doing, say in an office workplace, office style kind of workplace. And, once people understand, hey, I don't need to hire a person. This AI is able to do, it's able to do things as a student. It's able to do things as a professor. There are teachers using AI to make their tests, to make their presentations. This is already happening.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
yeah, and,
I
this
use it in
is
that process. I
e-
often use it in that process.
exactly,
Now,
exactly.
if it can do so, this is the hopeful part of that is if it can do 70% of the job, let's say, it can't do 100%, and so you still need the human to really focus in on that part that the AI can't do. And so that and it tends to not be the monotonous parts, right? The things that it's good at are the monotonous things that we don't always enjoy
Yeah.
doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And but it's also pretty creative too, so it can help us to be the best version of ourselves, right? So I think asking it better, knowing what to ask it, asking better questions is a skill that's well worth improving, and it's one that we're going to have to keep getting better and better at in order to remain relevant. That's really the skill, is being able to cooperate with AI rather than it being like an either AI or human kind of a question mark. It's like who are going to be the best humans to collaborate with AI? Kind of like what you were saying at the beginning, where you have the sort of parallel trajectories there
Yeah.
rather than a collision. And
So
I and
yeah.
I and I think the collision is happening because what we do is we train our students to be basically in competition with what AI does. So, uh, doing low level clerical work basically is what we're training all of our. It's
You
not
know,
often put that way, but that's what it is. Like when you have
yeah,
to
I
write
see
out
where
things.
I see where you're coming from. At the end of the day, college is not just a place you go to learn. It's also a place you go to do.
Hmm.
College, I've heard once that, the reason why a lot of employers prefer people with degrees is because a good degree, at least a genuine degree, it shows that you have the skills to, you at least have the soft skills. You know how to manage yourself, you know how to delegate your time, get things done. And, although a degree can prove these things, the actual, level of competency per student, that depends on the university, that depends on the student itself. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And, you know, a lot of these things will be shown once you actually put a person in the workplace. And this is the thing, we might have to roll back some of the technology in order to answer a lot of these issues we have with AI. Because if I were to ask you, you're a professor, you're in a class, you told your students to submit a paper. How will you actually know? Let's assume the AI is better than what you have to check, whether it was AI or not. Assume
Hmm.
Turnitin has not reached that point. How do you actually know? How do you actually know which student is doing things for real versus not? Now, if you sit all the students in a classroom, tell them to type a paper, you're watching them all type a paper, you've got people walking around a room. No one can cheat because guess what? You see what they're doing. Maybe give them PCs that they don't have access. Sorry, give me a second. My alarm went off. So, say that they're all in a room, you're watching them, like a
Hmm.
proctored test. We've actually had this when I was in elementary school. We had lots of proctored tests. People would walk around. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think I think that's going to happen. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is happening. But
It's yeah.
yeah, and I think what we're doing right now is also going to be a kind of transition that's going to take place. I think every student is going to be expected to have those kind of skills that you were talking about.
Yeah.
That's really the differentiating factor, because you can teach anybody the technical skills, but the question is, can they interface with a team? Can they represent your brand? Can they do they have the skills to uh, uh,
Pay the bills.
pay the bills? Yeah,
Pay the bills
to
at the
do
end of
to
the day.
do the things that the AI can't do, right? And
Yeah.
these human to human interactions are some things that AI would struggle with.
You
That's one of the
can't
few things they really struggle with,
you
right?
can't expect an AI to show up to work, clock in, and say hi to everyone. You
Right,
could
right.
tell you could write a prompt that says, pretend you're saying hi to many different coworkers. It'll try its best, but that human element is gone. And ultimately, that human element is really just a compilation of different interactions from humans. So it's not even genuine either.
Hmm.
AI doesn't have feelings. And
Right.
what makes a human genuine is our emotions. It's our logic. It's the way we think. Sometimes a human will take on a difficult circumstance if it means bettering another human.
Yes.
AI, if you ask AI, logically, you know, what what would be the best solution to preserve my own life in this circumstance? The AI is going to give you the solution to preserve yourself, but the AI doesn't have that empathy. It doesn't have that sympathy to be able to know, you know, I care about this other human being. This is another human being. And we've seen AI try to like fake emotions in a sense. If you ask an AI something that's not really ethically, that's something ethically questionable, the AI might put like a disclaimer,
Hmm.
but a disclaimer and then proceeding to tell me how to do the unethical thing,
Right.
not really, it's
It
not
misses the
really,
point.
yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
whole point. You shouldn't really be going out of your way to teach me how to do these, things. And yes, if you're wondering, there are AIs out there. Let's just refer to them as dark-sided AIs. There are AIs out there that don't really have these filters put in place to actually prevent these things. For example, Meta AI, it's a Llama 3 based model. you know, Meta manages this AI, and because Meta manages this AI, we can, if you ask it certain things, it's gonna flag it and it's gonna be like, hey, I can't tell you
Hmm.
about this, please ask me another question. But if I generate an AI on my own computer, let's say I have the technology to do it, and believe it or not, generating AI on your own PC is not too hard to do, actually. As long as you have a decent GPU, you could run a pretty decent watered down version of what's available commercially,
Hmm.
and it can generate things for you that, you might have to go on obscure parts of the web to find, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of illegal AIs out there. Um, Vicuña is an actual example. If you want to do some research on Vicuña, Vicuña is an uncensored AI that will literally tell you anything.
Mm.
There's no blocks in place to stop it from saying, hey, this is unethical. It's
Right.
not going to do that.
Right.
And
The kind of lecturing that a Chat GPT or a
yeah,
llama does,
yeah,
you'll miss that when you're using something
yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, right. I get you.
Yeah.
I get you.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and there's actually, I mean, there's so much more to talk about with that because there's that human cost of the AI that we don't ever really think about, which is the filtering of all the content.
Hmm.
They have very low paid people in developing countries uh, uh, looking at a lot of horrible things and kind of sorting them to make sure that it doesn't make it into these models, these commercially viable models.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff that hasn't had that, it's trained on the internet. So you've got the internet, right? All of it being bound up and served to you in these bite-sized prompts, and that can be pretty hard on a human mind to try to absorb. Um,
Yeah.
so, but So I don't recommend going out and finding these uh you know un uncensored
Oh
models.
no,
That
definitely
not a
do it.
not a good
Do
plan.
it at your own discretion. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
just what I have to say. Do it at your own discretion. I don't recommend it, but like I said, everyone deserves to know what's out there. You
yeah.
know, like
And and to your
yeah, yeah,
point, it's important to know that other people are using these models. So if
yeah.
you're trying to defraud people, you have access to those kind of models. If you're trying to create uh, there was someone who, one of these CEOs was testifying to Congress about the risk of someone using one of these models to assemble the knowledge necessary to produce genetic weapons. And,
Or what about evidence?
or
That's
yeah,
some, yeah,
falsified
yeah, yeah,
evidence, all
falsified
kinds of stuff.
evidence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of these liabilities to our system, all of these um, things that we have not figured out how to compensate for yet are vulnerabilities, and we do need to be aware of them. That that's the world we're living in now,
Hmm.
and it's kind of that arms race of first you build these walls and that keeps people out, then they build a cannon, right, and they blast through the walls,
Yeah.
and it's just the nature that offense usually has this advantage for a while before we figure out defenses to keep things safe and to keep to maintain privacy, to do
You
I think
know,
we're in a rough spot at this moment.
yeah, and it really goes back because remember at the beginning I mentioned history. You know, the history of technology, we've always seen a bit of a pushback with new technology because, for example, 20 years ago, it was the internet, and then maybe 40 years ago, it was the computer. You
Hmm.
know, it, it, we've seen this happen over time, when we realized how powerful the internet was, you know, what happened? People regulated the internet, people stepped in the way, and it wasn't as the internet isn't as free today as it was, say, even 10 years ago. We
Right.
see a lot more regulations, we see a lot more privacy. We've seen privacy concerns. The whole thing with Meta and Mark Zuckerberg is a prime example. People's data, you know, shouldn't just be given out, to people without my permission. I don't
Hmm.
I should have the right to know what data is being collected on me, and I should have a right to be able to delegate that data as I need. I'm not a product for you to go sell to someone else.
Right. And
And
now when you go to a website, you see those cookie selections, right? You see the
exactly.
compliance
You
requirements
know,
changing. Yeah.
it's just the whole argument, we gotta the thing is AI, we're at that point with AI where we realize, okay, this is the potential. So now people have to sit down and say, okay, since this power is not going to go away, we need to figure out how to regulate it because in 20, 30 years from now, just like the computer went to the internet,
Hmm.
now we have AI. What's the next big thing? So I feel like we should just we had an approach. There's already a known approach as to how this new technology comes out. You know, highlighting these approaches, highlighting what we know is going to be the biggest keys to handling this issue, this um this social issue. And AI is really powerful. Like I said, I've used it in my schoolwork and just to touch base, to talk about that paper I wrote. I know you wanted me to talk about
Yeah, absolutely.
that
Yeah.
that story. I was accused of using AI on a paper that had nothing to do with AI. And I was shocked. I was shocked. I stayed up to 11:59. Yes, I did. 11:59 is the golden hour. And
Yeah.
I stayed up and I tried to submit that paper and I did. And the similarity score came back and said you were using AI. And my professor gave me a 0 and
Mm.
warned me, um I don't want to say threat, but more of a warning, like, hey, I caught you using AI, I'm gonna give you a 0. Please don't do this again. The professor's a good professor. If you were to watch this podcast, he probably knows
Yeah.
who I'm talking. But to be honest, he's a really good professor, and I don't want to throw any shade in his direction. He's just doing his job at the end of the day. But where's that line, How do
Yeah.
we know, just like how do we know whether or not someone's using AI or not? How do we know that,
When they're not.
when they're not using AI, how do we know that we are being genuine? And it's really just an arms race
Mm.
because, the malicious users are going to try their best to get ahead of the genuine users. And then it's going to keep on happening. So, at the end of the day, I don't really know the best solution to this issue. I'm gonna be honest with you, because, you know, but we do see an issue, and that's the first step to the process. Regulation is good, but in the academic setting, we're gonna need to stress, you know, ethical AI usage, and we're going to need to stress the the importance of being genuine because like we said, send a student that graduated using AI versus a student that graduated by doing things genuinely. Send them to a workplace and see which one can hold themselves better. Likely the
Hmm.
person who took the time and the work to actually do that. You're gonna see them do better. This is without saying. So, to all those out there who are considering, who don't really know much about I encourage you to play around with it. Play around with it, see what you can do with it, but don't let it get ahead of you because you're deservicing yourself as a person if you rely on this technology because technology is good, but people are good too, And we all have our own personalities, we all have our own ways of doing things, and mistakes are important. But perfecting everything with AI doesn't give you the ability to make those mistakes. And thus, you don't know where you fall short. You lose your own identity to what? Uh, uh AI that could generate text on your screen, that doesn't sound like a worth it trade to me?
So it sounds like what you're saying is use it, but don't use it as a shortcut to get out of doing work. Use it as something to challenge you and to learn from, but not to replace you. Because if you use it to replace you, it will replace you, right? Because any if it can do everything that you can do, then then where's the part that
Yeah,
you're contributing?
exactly. Exactly. We see people already in society concerned about their career. They feel threatened because of this AI. And they're coming up with reasons as to the boss, you don't want to replace me with AI, and here's a list of reasons. But, you know,
Generated by AI.
generated by AI, exactly. But you want to know something? For those who use the AI, you're going to see that reflect in who they are as a person. The genuine people are going to be picked out of the flock of ingenuous people. And at the end of the day, I agree with what you said, but moreover, don't lose your identity
Hmm.
to AI. Just like how we don't let technology make you forget who you are as a person. Don't let technology forget that that person on the other side of the screen is somebody worth caring for, is somebody who has a life, somebody who has a personality. You know, AI doesn't need food and water. People do, right? And this world runs on people at the end of the day. So if you're selling yourself out by using a piece of technology, you're not only limiting your potential, but you're also showing people that you're not as valuable as you say you are.
It kind of reminds me of these smartphones.
Exactly.
As I pass through these bus stops, and I'm
Yeah,
looking over at the high schoolers and the middle schoolers, all of them are looking down at their phones and they're not interacting with each other, and they're lost with that technology. And we've
exactly.
already lost it, right? In a
Hmm.
lot of ways, we've already lost it. And let's not lose more of ourselves um, uh, by using AI in a way that uh, makes our life so easy that we don't still have to adapt
I
and
think the
struggle
word you're
and
looking for is
improve.
disconnected.
Yeah, disconnected,
Disconnected.
absolutely.
Exactly.
And so that actually brings me to a call to action that I had in mind with this. And I appreciate so much you are taking the time to have this
Of course, of
conversation
course.
conversation and lending your voice on multiple occasions now to raise awareness on some of these important issues and
Yeah,
to give a perspective that we don't always have access to. Because as much as we teachers like to think that we know, we've got the pulse of the students. Maybe
yeah,
we do, maybe we don't. Maybe there's a bit more things that need to be said here.
yeah, yeah,
And so that's my challenge to you and actually to everybody listening. Is I think we should all be doing what we're doing right here, making podcasts, having conversations with each other in public, because these things need to be talked about. And if it just gets um, you know swept under the rug or ignored or whatever the case is, then there's professors that are going to go around and see a high AI percentage on their detector and say, oh well, I guess that means they're guilty. And I mean, just to really draw that out, you didn't even use AI on that false positive,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Like you,
Yeah.
that was not one of the occasions where you were using AI. That was
Mm-hmm.
all Aaron, and that's how indistinguishable the technology has become from a human voice. Is that sometimes if your grammar is good enough, it's going to flag it as being AI generated, right?
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
that's one thing it does pretty well. It
Grammarly.
spells well. Yeah,
Yeah.
Grammarly. Yeah,
Grammarly. Yeah.
yeah. And so this is really important for educators to understand is that there's there's an opportunity to challenge students. Yes, make sure that they really understand what they are turning in. So ask them questions about it. Don't just ignore it and sweep it under the rug if you think that there's a chance that they could be using AI. But also don't go in with an accusatory approach too, because they could very well be innocent, and that could be a false positive that they never even touched AI, but it says that it's AI generated just because the technology has a very hard time detecting it and distinguishing from human and AI. And that is important to understand. But again, so my call
Yeah.
to action is I think everybody should have their own channel, especially students, because if you really want to stand out and demonstrate that you have the soft skills that employers need and that you can communicate, then this is the way to stand out and to do that. So I applaud you for the altruistic reasons for why you're on here, but I want to draw attention to anybody who doesn't have their own podcast yet to also think about the benefits to you and to your
Yeah.
career of starting something like this. And
Y-
so, if I'm not willing to do it myself, then how can I challenge you to do it? So I'm making a podcast too,
You
and
know,
this is
just
our
to
first episode.
yeah, just to go ahead and also, one up that call to action. At the end of the day, you have to think about yourself. Am I gonna sell myself out to a piece of technology? Because what we're seeing happening now is because we already see how well AI can perform to 70, 80% standard. Human being could perform, obviously, they're the benchmark 100%. That means we just have to try that much harder now to be
Mm-hmm,
ahead of AI. And what's going to happen in the near future is things are going to get competitive, especially in academia. Academia is going to get to the point where things are going to be more competitive. Employers are going to be looking for more things out of the average student like me.
mm-hmm,
And because of this, we're going to have to show that, I'm not just the average kid sitting behind a computer using GPT. No, I'm this, and that. I'm much more than that.
mm-hmm,
Because, an AI can't give a presentation. I don't care what deepfake you want to use today.
mm-hmm,
I'm pretty sure you can't fool a whole presentation that's like an hour long. And these are going to be the things, the consequence of, relying on AI is that you're shortchanging yourself. So, to one up that call to action, make sure you understand, what you're doing and don't shortchange yourself because you're a
so
lot more
use it.
worth it. Use
Use
it.
it because you're gonna be
Yeah.
at risk of being accused of using
Listen,
AI either
listen.
way.
Your competition's using
Yeah,
AI. Your
yeah,
competition's gonna
yeah,
use GPT. Don't get me wrong. I'm gonna listen. You're putting me up against someone. I'm gonna use Meta AI. I'm gonna search
yeah.
my questions up and stuff. But the difference between me and my competition is which one can keep the most human element in that process.
Hmm.
Which one can be the most genuine with it.
Yeah. So it's a difference
Mhm.
between letting the AI steer and being behind the wheel yourself. And it makes a
Exactly.
great co-pilot. That's why when I use it to code, I love how it can accelerate my process. It can help me brainstorm. It can help me avoid errors. It's good to spot
Productivity.
errors.
Yeah.
It's productivity. But I've tried to use it on projects that I didn't understand the language and I was completely out of my element, didn't have any background, just to see if it was possible. It is not. You must know. You must be in the driver's seat. And
Exactly.
if you're having it steer, it will steer you into a ditch. So
It
make sure
will.
that you are let it navigate, let it help you, let it challenge you with Have you thought about this, that, and the other thing? Challenge it to challenge you, I guess is the thing.
You know,
I have it ask me questions.
AI is like Google Maps. You know, if you're in an unfamiliar town, Google Maps can help you,
Hmm.
but it's not always going to be 100% accurate. Sometimes Google Maps might take you to the wrong place or might make you do, especially in secluded, like remote areas, I find that Google Maps is not always accurate.
Yeah,
But if you know the area, not only do you know the best routes, but you also know the shortcuts. And AI is not going to be able to know that unless you teach it. AI only knows as much as we program into it, as much as we teach it. So, you know, that's the ultimate difference. You know, be better than the AI because otherwise the AI is going to be better than you and the AI is going to replace you. The people who worry about AI are the ones that aren't excelling above it.
yeah, I agree with that. I agree with
Mm-hmm.
that. Everybody, all of my colleagues who are afraid of AI typically haven't used it and don't really have a familiarity with it. Otherwise, they would know where its shortcomings are and what value they still bring to it. And so, yeah, I agree that we really have to get used to using it, but also not rely on it to the point where it does all the work for us and all the thinking
Yeah.
for us because
Mm-hmm.
it's not there to the point where it can do that. Maybe someday, I don't know. There could be an AGI that's just better than all humans combined. Maybe that could be possible someday. But in the foreseeable future, I think there's still a very important role for us to play, and that would be um, to kind of crystallize that for anybody who has a hard time imagining that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what I would say is don't think in terms of careers. Don't think in terms of jobs because jobs are going to be switching out a lot. There's going to be
Oh
things
yeah.
that,
Oh yeah.
as technology changes, prompt engineer may be a thing this year, and then maybe next year it's not even an issue anymore because they just figured out how
Look what
to.
happened to cryptocurrency.
Right. Yeah. Look,
Yeah.
look at what happened to that. I remember when Microsoft Word, like if you knew how to use Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint, like, if you understood that suite, the Office suite, then, that was all you really had to do. And
Mm-hmm.
now that's just the ante to get in the game, like to be able to use these kind of productivity software.
Exactly.
It's expected, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
expected. And I think that's what it's going to be like for a lot of jobs where to your point of how the standards are going to raise things that and programming could be one of those things. Cybersecurity will definitely be one of those things. You will absolutely be expected to have at least a minimum understanding of how to keep your company's network safe. And
Yeah, that's the whole basis.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
whole
So
basis.
like we're all having to play defense right now, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, so I don't think you made a wrong career move at all, but I would think in terms of problems. That's what I would say because we're always going to have these problems. And if you think in terms of solving problems with that more entrepreneurial mindset, as opposed to specific job roles and only being confined to that one thing. So that kind of adaptability is, I think, going to be a really important distinguishing characteristic too, because we will have to. I've been in the same job for goodness since 2006,
Oh
right?
wow.
So
Yeah.
so 18 years I've been doing the same job, and I don't know for how much longer that job is going to stay intact or stay um, undifferentiated. Maybe it'll split apart into multiple jobs. Maybe we'll have, um, you know, 90% of the job done by AI, but then that
Yeah.
10% of the job that needs to be done by a human, we'll actually need to hire more humans because now
You
that's
know,
the bottleneck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. On average, I'm not sure exactly who published the statistic. But on average, we see people change their careers around, 3 to 7 times in their lifetime.
Yeah, yeah,
And this has been something that was even proven. In fact, even around 40% of degree holders don't even work in the industry that they have, you
yep,
know, which calls back to what I said earlier, having a degree is not really it's not to say that you don't know anything about your field, but it's more so to say that you're structured. And you see, AI is getting to a place where it's becoming very structured. and you're just going to have to show that you have that better structure, that better foundation than the AI. Those are going to be the people who get to stay in their careers and who get the more money. In fact, forget about AI entirely. We see this throughout, history. The most competent worker is going to be the one that's going to get the promotion.
Hmm.
We see this happen. If I'm your manager, if I'm your supervisor, you show up 10 minutes late every day, um, you're not well dressed, or you don't submit your stuff on time, you cause problems, I'm not going to promote you. Anyone in their right mind would promote you.
Right.
And we that's the same thing with AI. At the end of the day, you just got to be more proficient than the technology that's being handed to you. That's what's going to make you stand out. We can use technology to help us be proficient, but it can't make us proficient. You know, a car could have a million safety features, but if the person behind the wheel doesn't know how to drive, how safe can that car be?
So I think we both agree that there's an important role for humans to play going forward, and
Oh
that
yeah, definitely.
there is a pathway for um, not just getting smashed by the wave, but being able to surf over it too, right? So we can stay
Mm-hmm.
on top of this thing
Yeah.
if we're keeping our wits about us, and it could be a
Mm-hmm.
pretty fun ride,
Yeah.
or it can be a pretty rough ride, depending on where on that wave you're going to be. So
Yeah.
hopefully, if anybody has watched this video all the way through this far, then I think it's safe to say that they're very interested in being at the top of that wave. So
Yeah.
is there any final message that you want to send across, or any place that you want to direct people towards? Uh, uh, Make sure that they check out.
You know, At the end of the day, new technology is not something that's going to go away. We're going to see probably a new piece of technology in another 10, 20 years. So what I have to leave you with this, and this can last many lifetimes, stay ahead. Stay ahead of the game, educate yourself on what's out there, and use the tools that you have. AI is just another tool. Electric cars is a tool. You know, they made backup cameras for a reason. So, you could see what's behind you without having to turn your neck. But, backup camera may not necessarily be perfect. But to focus really on what to leave you guys with, stay ahead of the game. Be more competent than the AI. Be more competent than the technology that's given you, and you will stand out. Stand out from the crowd. Be a gem. Not everyone's going to be a gem. The majority is going to take the wide path. The minority that takes the narrow path is going to be the one that's going to get the light.
So don't take the easy path. Definitely keep challenging yourself. I love the emphasis on competence. The importance of that is only increasing, and the
That's
value of
all
it
it
is
is.
increasing.
That's all it is.
So,
Competence.
yes. All right. Well, Aaron, it's been a fantastic discussion, and I hope it's the first of many more. Like I said, I think you should start
Yeah.
a podcast channel. You're a natural at this.
Yeah.
I see a bright future ahead of you, and
Thank you.
wish you all the best.
Thank you. All right.
All right. We'll stop it there for this time, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one.